All right, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is now calling on Labor Secretary Alexander Acosta to resign. Acosta is facing criticism for his role in brokering a secret plea deal for the very politically connected financier Jeffrey Epstein in 2008. Epstein now faces new charges in connections with running an alleged sex trafficking ring in which he allegedly sexually abused dozens of underage girls. Those accusations are very similar to the ones that he faced when Acosta was involved in this case a decade ago. So joining us now with the political and every other kind of implication, we have Jess McIntosh, former Director of Communications Outreach for Hillary Clinton, the Clinton campaign, Margaret Taleb, Senior White House Correspondent for Bloomberg News, and John Avlon, CNN Senior Political Analyst. Okay. While everybody was sleeping, let's just bring everybody up to speed on what Nancy Pelosi is now calling for. She tweeted out this: Secretary Acosta must step down. As U.S. Attorney, he engaged in an unconscionable agreement with Jeffrey Epstein, kept secret from courageous young victims, preventing them from seeking justice. This was known by President Trump when he appointed him to the cabinet. Hashtag Acosta resign. Jess, the White House has not said anything about this. And the more that comes to light, the more baffling it is what Alexander Acosta did. Why wouldn't he tell the victims that he was making this sweetheart deal with Jeffrey Epstein, by which Jeffrey Epstein, he could have served life in prison. Mm-hmm. He ended up getting 13 months, but he was able to go to his office and work 6 days a week.
Yeah, the work release program from jail is a new one for me, and I think a new one for most Americans. That's a Jeffrey Epstein special. What's happening within the Trump administration is that we have an alarmingly large number of men who either have been accused credibly of rape, accused of sexual assault, accused of domestic violence, who have found their way into the White House, into the administration, where they find protection by the president, who has been accused by some 17 women of his own. Just 3 weeks ago, we had a credible accusation of rape against our president. I think at this point, we can see the pattern. We understand that these men are not engaged in helping women. They don't even care when it's young girls. We saw the Republican Party stand by Roy Moore in Alabama after it came out that he abused many young girls just as young as Jeffrey Epstein's victim. They decided they wanted him in anyway. I think that told women everything we needed to know about whether Republicans and this administration are ever going to take this seriously.
There's one thing clear. Acosta isn't accused of this. He's accused of handling the case
Jeffrey Epstein
badly.
Basically operated in open sight for a very long time because of men like Acosta who were able to help him cover it.
That's hugely important. There's more mystery around why Acosta cut the sweetheart deal with Jeffrey Epstein than there has been about all these allegations about Jeffrey Epstein's activities over a decade plus. So that's, I mean, again, this is a case about abuse of power and arrogance of power, as well as this absurd sweetheart deal for a high-priced financier who gets basically, you know, a kind of work release from prison deal that people caught with a dime bag of weed wouldn't get back in the 1990s.
And again, we're waiting to hear from Secretary Acosta this morning. We're waiting to hear if the White House responds. And one of the issues is that Jeffrey Epstein, in this case, has just tentacles everywhere. Let me just read the Washington Post reporting on what makes the White House nervous about this morning, Margaret. Officials at the White House are nervous that Democrats will encourage women allegedly abused by Epstein to testify publicly before Congress, drawing attention to Acosta's work on the plea deal, according to current and former administration officials. How much runway do you think Acosta has at this point here, Margaret, as the Secretary of Labor?
Well, I do think the next couple of days are probably going to be somewhat decisive, but it should be noted a couple of things. Number one, that not just the Trump administration, but the Obama administration and the Bush administration were aware of this plea deal, and that this is all sort of part of Acosta's history leading up to the confirmation hearing. So all of this was known at the time. What's changed are some of the political circumstances and some of the new details that have emerged. But also Bloomberg's reporting shows that Acosta has some completely separate political problems inside the Trump administration, which is that among at least some, there is a sense that he's not moved fast enough on deregulation and some pro-business type of issues, and that there are some inside the administration who would like to see his deputy elevated. So I think if President Trump were to move against Acosta, there is an entirely parallel background that has nothing to do with this and everything to do with the business climate that is at work here. Whether these two converge, whether pressure from the Democrats and some pressure from business lobbyists converge, I think remains to be seen. But I don't think that President Trump is going to respond to Nancy Pelosi alone.
Yeah, but I mean, what you're saying, the latter of what you've just described is what gets President Trump's attention generally when one of his cabinet stops working out for him. So maybe Acosta's days are numbered, but just Democrats should not be so sanguine about all of this coming to light and about women testifying about what happened, because so many people are implicated, including Bill Clinton, who spent time with Jeffrey Epstein and has put out a statement that is questionable. So last night, his spokesperson felt compelled to say this: President Clinton knows nothing about the terrible crimes Jeffrey Epstein pleaded guilty to in Florida some years ago, or those with which he has recently been charged in New York. In 2002 and 2003, President Clinton took a total of 4 trips on Jeffrey Epstein's airplane, 1 to Europe, 1 to Asia, 2 to Africa, which included stops in connection with the work of the Clinton Foundation. Now, the problem is that there are lots of other reports in different outlets that suggest that Bill Clinton took many, many more flights with Jeffrey Epstein and spent more time with him than this statement suggests.
To the extent that any person in power in either party was involved in not just protecting Jeffrey Epstein, but legitimizing him, we knew that these reports were out there. Jeffrey Epstein's behavior was sort of a New York tabloid fodder in the 90s and early 2000s. It's not credible that somebody would simply be completely unaware that there were these rumors around this man. It's not credible for the current president or a former president. So I think at this point, it's way past time to have the reckoning about what these guys are allowed to get away with because of the virtue of the money and power that they enjoy.
And let the chips fall where they may be on partisanship.
And again, the idea of this was out there. You know, who talked about this in 2002? Donald Trump, right? He told to New York Magazine, I've known Jeff for 15 years, terrific guy. He's a lot of fun to be with. It's even said that he likes beautiful women as much as I do, and many of them are on the younger side. No doubt about it. Jeffrey enjoys his social life. So it was out there. All right, want to cover a few other subjects here quickly. Elizabeth Warren raised a lot of money. Yeah. You know, $19 million, and this is after she said she would stop doing closed-door fundraisers with big donors, smaller donations. $19 million is a lot. It's also more than Bernie Sanders, and I know a lot of people compare that.
Yeah, look, this is a big deal because she'd taken herself out of the big money closed-door game. And they'd been lowering expectations. They'd lost a fundraiser at one point. So for her to come forward with this kind of a haul from small dollar donors shows there really is grassroots energy around her campaign. And it contrasts with Bernie Sanders, who's, I think, having a hard time recreating some of that magic and grassroots enthusiasm from 2016.
We only have a few seconds, Margaret. Why? Why has Bernie Sanders lost some luster for fundraising or from people with money, and Elizabeth Warren has gained?
Well, to a large extent, they're sharing the same lane. And she had, not the world's greatest launch, but in the second quarter, we really saw her stock pick up. And I think, among that part of the Democratic voting base, and with that, the fundraising and the ability to compete to get close to Joe Biden's numbers without the private fundraisers really does show the contours of that sort of a contest lining up, and makes it difficult not just for Sanders, but shows for Harris some of the challenges, I think, in continuing to move forward.
Makes the debate in less than 3 weeks.
Even more interesting.
Exactly, right here on CNN. All right, Jess, Margaret, John, thank you.
Okay, the Gulf states facing their first tropical threat of the season. Chad Myers has our forecast next.